Free your mind.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard. Welcome to yet another edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show that happens here every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. here at Fair Hotel, and the entrance is always absolutely free. A recorded version of the same runs on television, on NBS television every Saturday from 4 to 5 p.m. Your speaker is Andrew Rumba Katsabe, and I'd like to thank you so much for being part of this debate here. Those of you who have managed to come here physically at Fair Hotel, and those of you following us on our social media platforms, this is the People's Pan-African Parliament. We discuss issues that actually affect Africa, not only about discussing them, but finding practical solutions. And ladies and gentlemen, we have just seen the youngest or the newest president in East African region taking a trip to America. And so we want to do analysis of what that means to the Pan-African context. To be specific, what Kenya's non-NATO ally status and Ruto Biden newfound love means to the Great Lakes region and Africa. We want to analyze that and see whether that kind of newly found very entrenched relationship or friendship between Kenya and East Africa, being represented by Kenya's president, Dr. William Ruto, is actually something that we should embrace. Even before I give my opinions, let me first read an open letter from a Kenyan man called Nguzi Wasiongo. Before I give my own analysis, let me first read this letter from a Kenyan who is actually living in the US, and then we can take it up from there. This is an open letter to President William Ruto. William Ruto, why have you chosen to sell Kenya cheap to the United States of Apartheid? Not United States of America. He's saying United States of Apartheid. This is not my words. Following the recent visit to the United States by Kenyan President, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a Kenyan author and East Africa's leading novelist, has expressed deep concern regarding Ruto's decisions that appear to be compromising Kenya's sovereignty and integrity. According to an open letter to Ruto, the famous author highlights deep concerns about Kenya's direction and future under Ruto's leadership, and goes ahead to question his choice to engage so intimately with the United States of America, a country whose policies and actions have often been described as reminiscent of apartheid. During his visit to the United States, Ruto secured over 16 US manufactured helicopters to boost the country's security operations and peacekeeping missions from President Joe Biden's administration. Ladies and gentlemen, according to a statement released by the White House on Thursday last week, the 16 helicopters, I beg your pardon, my computer is freezing, I beg your pardon. During his visit to the United States, Ruto secured over 16 US manufactured helicopters to boost the country's security operations and peacekeeping missions from President Joe Biden's administration. According to a statement released by the White House on Thursday last week, the 16 helicopters include 8 helis to bolster regional peace and security, as well as 8 MD-500 to enhancing Kenya's participation in peacekeeping missions. Kenya will also receive approximately 150 Mi-1117 armored security vehicles from the US Excess Defense Article stocks, which are projected to arrive in Kenya in September 2024. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, Biden also said that he would designate Kenya as the first major non-NATO US ally in sub-Saharan Africa, as he welcomed Ruto for the first state visit to the US by an African leader in nearly 16 years. The significant strategic move signals the shifting of US security cooperation to East Africa, just as US troops prepare to depart from Niger, leaving a vacuum that Russian forces have begun to fill. With all the above, among other agreements, the author expresses strong disapproval of Ruto's policies regarding relations with the United States. Dear William Ruto, images of your recent state visit to the United States were very disturbing to me and to every patriotic Kenyan. I saw you seated on a chair, grinning, while Biden stood behind you, his face beaming with satisfaction. Why not? He had just announced that you had signed off our beloved Kenya to make it a non-member ally of NATO. In other words, you had agreed to become NATO's errand boy in America's struggle with Russia and China for access to resources of the continent. Ruto, do you know that NATO murdered Muammar Gaddafi so that Libya oil fields, which Gaddafi had nationalized, would revert to the West? Gaddafi was once the chairman of the African Union, of which Kenya was a founding member. But this other picture was no less disturbing when you were inside the White House. Haitians were in the streets demonstrating, calling you a slave. Do you know the history of Haiti? Please read The Black Jacobins, a book written by a once Jomo Kenyatta Pan-African ally, C.L.R. James. Haiti, now a black people's state, used to be a slave colony of France, but led by Toussaint Louverture, Haiti, the richest colony of its time, fought French slavery, and in 1804, it seized its independence. In USA, slavery was then in full boom. America didn't want its African slaves to emulate Haiti, and it has never forgiven Haiti for that. And thus began the story of America's destabilization of Haiti. Ruto, do you see the irony of your actions? The USA was originally a settler colony taking over the land that belonged to Native Americans. In 1776, the white settlers declared their independence from their English king, but the colonized Native Americans remained colonized. Kenya was equally a British settler colony. The white settlers wanted to have a similar kind of independence, but the Mau Mau led by Dedan Kimathi stopped them. Years later, Algeria, Rhodesia, and South Africa would follow the example of Kenya. Thus, the country you now lead was first to stop the historical trend of white settlers claiming themselves independent, as in America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Ruto, you have chosen to betray that history of pride. Ruto, you have chosen to become an agent of the West. Ruto, have you chosen to sell your country cheap? Why? Oh, why? Atlanta, Georgia, May 28, 2024, written and signed by Wambuthi Wathiongo, a Kenyan writer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in context, or in brief, we know that why there is a war between Russia and Ukraine is the fact that America wanted to use Ukraine as a center for them to put their whatever weapons and technology they want to put in Ukraine to enable them oversee what Russia is doing. That was the major problem. All other things is just hearsay, but the major problem is that America wants to use Ukraine as a station now to start overseeing and overwatching what Russia is doing. And Russia told Ukraine that is impossible. It's like you are telling me to stay calm when you are bringing a rapist on our apartment and I know that I have a girl child in my home. Ukraine is trying to allow America to use them to oversee Russia. And so that is equated to a man who brings a rapist near him, but in the apartment, there is a girl, and the father of the girl is saying, this is impossible. You cannot bring a rapist near our home. And so Ukraine could not take it. And now that is the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And America is supporting Ukraine, of course, because by doing that, they will be supporting the agenda.
Honorable Speaker, indeed I've prepared a 10-page presentation over this topic because to me, this is the most practical topic we can ever have as Africans. NATO's footprints on the African continent is very much present. We saw from the last video presentation of how NATO has assassinated past African presidents, Gaddafi, and how NATO was behind the Arab Spring. And generally, NATO is after the African continent. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was formed on the 4th April 1949 with a very clear motive to dominate and control the world. They make no mistake about that. And this announcement that NATO is going to have Kenya as a non-member ally was made by none other than President Biden himself. Few days before Ruto went to the USA, I think he had audience with our president. Few days after the announcement that Kenya is going to become a non-NATO ally, America has announced sanctions against Uganda. These sanctions for the beginning are being announced against Museveni's ministers and commanders. But we know that ultimately the sanctions are aimed at Museveni as the target. If the sanctions are on a commander, a field force commander like Eluelu, who does not have ultimate command of the UPDF, does it need rocket science for you to know that the eventual target is the commander-in-chief? The person with the ultimate authority.
Professor.
And this behavior of NATO is not new. When they fall out with the regime, they start with sanctions, and these sanctions eventually mature into a no-fly zone, issuance of warrants, as in Uganda's case, possible against the president and his son. So, Right Honorable Speaker, it is good for us to discuss this motive of making...
So these sanctions, finally they are targeting the commander-in-chief.
I have written in my paper, backed by evidence, an opinion that this, to me, seems to be the ultimate objective. Things are happening systematically. And if you looked at my paper, which I can also send to you on a soft copy, if I send to you tomorrow on a soft copy after this presentation, you look at what NATO did to President Hosni Mubarak. Actually, Hosni Mubarak was a NATO ally and a US ally for more years than Museveni, even better than Museveni. But the moment Hosni Mubarak became chairperson of the non-aligned movement in 2009, before his term could expire, NATO moved against him. Are you not aware that our president, January 19th this year, became also chairman of the same non-aligned movement? So, Right Honorable Speaker, to me, it is not a surprise that what befell Hosni Mubarak when he became chair of NAM is most likely going to befall our president as he has become chairman of NAM. What are the targets NATO seeks? NATO always seeks to block African unity.
NATO seeks to block African unity.
Exactly.
They don't want us
because
united.
a unified Africa cannot be manipulated. Read my paper. You will understand why it is NATO planes that bombed out Gaddafi in the same year that they organized the Arab Spring to remove Hosni Mubarak. So NATO cannot, in the East African region, have two bulls in one corral. The rise of Ruto as a blue-eyed boy for NATO, like Ngugi wa Thiong'o has said, is also the decline, forceful decline of our president as the blue-eyed boy by America. I therefore want, if you look at the back of my paper, this paper, gentlemen, is fundamental in Africa and even in Uganda. If you care to read it, there are 6 reasons why the NATO chose Kenya in these times to be a NATO non-member ally. They are at the back of my paper, and I put them clearly. Number 1, the historic links with Kenya. That one, the one Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about, that Kenya was actually meant to be an American settler nation. They were only defeated in it by Mau Mau under Dedan Kimathi. The second probable reason is the strategic UK and NATO bases that are in Mombasa. Those bases have never left Kenya since the colonial time. The second other reason, the last reason, the second other reason is the perceived, this is now the fourth, the perceived, this is the fifth, the perceived Russia, China dominance of this region under the watch of Museveni. You see, if you look at the package Ruto has been given, he's been given a package to construct a railway line from Mombasa to Nairobi, shortening the traveling hours from 11 to 4 hours to counter the Chinese what? Railway construction. They have offered a road to construct a road, multi-billion, to counter the Chinese. So the ally proposed by NATO now is to counter China and Russian influence here. Lastly, we must also remember that the actual de facto president of the USA now is not Joe Biden. The actual strategic and de facto president of the USA is Barack Obama. Those who follow American politics know it. That from the strategy to campaign for Biden to bring him up to the strategic visiting of the capitals of the world is being done by Obama. And Obama comes from Kenya. He's a Kenyan Luo. So that Kenya is his home. So we should also not forget that there's something behind. There's something that also is playing a part. That is also playing a part. And those are the reasons I've put. And when you read my paper, you'll find more examples to explain that. I want to say, Your Excellency, your Right Honorable Speaker, these 2026 elections in which we are going will be most affected by that change in game plan of the USA. All the last 4 elections in this last decade in Uganda were funded, monitored, and post-election supported by USA, Europe, and the UK. You know, as President Stalin of Russia said, the people who vote don't matter. It doesn't matter how many people have voted for Bobby Wine how many people are voting for the next presidential candidate, Odongoto, or Akena, or Mao, or who. Doesn't matter. What matters is, as Stalin said, who counts the votes? And in all the past elections, the people who have been counting the votes in Uganda has been a company called Smartmatic. Smartmatic. This is a company that even counted and reached the last elections in Kenya. Smartmatic. And Smartmatic is headquartered in Delaware, the home state of President Biden. And whenever these elections are held, kumbe we have been electing without knowing that the servers of these elections are in Europe. Even when Smartmatic conducts our elections here in all the last elections which Museveni has been winning, kumbe the servers have not been here. So elections start with the involvement of European powers. They give the money, they pay the company going to count the votes. So 2026, who's going to count the votes?
So they will be counted in Delaware.
And who is going to determine who wins? And even who is going to give the money? Because you see, European Union, wameshamaliza hawa. They have said theirs. Wamesema, we are not going to give you money because of anti-homosexuality what? USA, hivyo. Who is even going to fund? And even when they fund, who is going to guarantee who is to announce which results? I believe, Right Honorable Speaker, that the 2026 elections are going to be the first elections from Museveni to contest in the last 2 decades without open American support. It's going to have implications.
Open American support.
Yeah.
I want to make a quick historical political science distinction between Kenya and Uganda, because it will help us to understand where we are and why Ruto Biden and not Kagame Biden and not Museveni Biden. Because if you want to know where you're going, you need to know where you're coming from. And in case you are lost at the roadside, please don't ask people where is the destination you are looking for. Ask them where you came from. At least they will not lie. Then you know the person is telling the truth. And then the second question would be, where is this destination? When Uganda and Kenya were struggling for independence and many African countries, there was a complete departure, Mr. Speaker, on the nature of pre-colonial struggle in Kenya and Uganda. The colonialists, the British, established a protectorate in Uganda. In Kenya, they established a colony. And this is why Kenya and Uganda are different. The whites never imagined every single time of their life they would ever leave Kenya, the early settlers. They had planned Kenya to be their perpetual home. So they coined the African mind in such a manner that they would be workers of the colonialists. In Uganda, they created a British protectorate because they wanted to use it as a place for extracting cash crops, cotton and coffee. Now, because the British established a protectorate in Uganda, the nature of independent struggle in Uganda was our thing. Let's get our thing from the British. It was a collective struggle of our ancestors, our grandfathers, to get independence. But in Kenya, listen to this. The nature of independence Kenya, the independence struggle in Kenya was not our thing. It was an elite struggle. The Africans who were working in the white farms were struggling to get independence so that they do exactly what the white man did. So the nature of the pre-independence struggle in Kenya was led by the elite. So immediately they kicked out the white man out of Kenya. The blacks took over the same industries the Kenyans, the whites were running. For example, Delamere Farm. When they chased the Lord Delamere, you now started seeing black men like me and you running the same multinationals that the white man was doing in Kenya. So in Kenya, we have a bigger economy, a stronger middle class. In Uganda, we have a weak economy, a weak middle class. In Kenya, the Kenyan economy is Kenyan-owned. Safaricom, the shareholders are Kenyans. In Uganda, the Ugandan economy is foreign-owned. Uganda is the garden of South Africa, as of now. MTN, DSTV, Belbia, Stanbic. So it becomes of strategic interest that President Biden should take interest in Kenya. Why? There are black men like me and women in Kenya who have colossal sums of money in their hands that they cannot be intimidated by the Western world because they have been making this money for over 50 years. When you talk of economic engine in the African continent, 3 countries must run into your mind. Kenya, Egypt, South Africa. They run this continent economically. Controversially, when you talk of the military engine in this continent, 3 countries, South Africa, Egypt, and Uganda. Now, when President Biden calls Ruto and they make those things they did, I've seen walking and all those things. This is my reading. I see nothing wrong with President Ruto going to the US. I'm not a skeptic. I will never be a pessimist, and I'm also not a cynic. I absolutely see nothing wrong with President Ruto going to the US. But I also see nothing right with him going there. It is a photo moment, it is tourism, seeing how you walk, with the First Lady. I saw the Vice President yesterday thanking the President, how he showed them a good example, walking while holding his wife's hand. You see, I had an opportunity to live in Europe 3 years, and I studied the mindset of the Western world. One thing I've seen is Africa is their garden. They will never accept unity of the African continent because they produce nothing. Let me ask you one question. What does Britain produce? Tell me one thing that Britain produces to make it the most powerful country in the world. What does United Kingdom produce? Let's answer this question. What? Nothing. Other than flat iron called Phillips. Tell me another thing. Nothing. So they have positioned themselves, but the British have positioned themselves that for every $1 you borrow from anywhere in the world, it will be challenged, it will be channeled through their system. By the time it reaches the African government account, it is already $1.7, $1.07. 7 cents is the cost of transferring it. You borrow 1 million, you pay 1.7. They just sell information to the whole world. BBC. They produce nothing. So they will never accept the unity of the African continent from the economic perspective. I hope you are aware that 6 banks controls all the international financial transactions. 6 banks in the world. And as they continue campaigning, I see everyone has a smartphone there. Congratulations. There is a deliberate effort by the Western world to digitalize the economy, to introduce e-cash. There is money put in Bank of Uganda. Bank of Uganda has had meetings with all financial institutions. They are rolling out all financial instructions, so that financial transactions, so that in 15 years, my prediction as a political philosopher, in 40 years you will not see paper money. You will not need it. So as the e-money rolls out, the owners of those multinational, Visa card, MasterCard, they will get 1 shilling from you. For every 1 million shillings you send, MTN, the Southern African multinational, gets 11,000 shillings just for sending a message. For sending a message from me to you, a message, you charge 11,000 shillings. So the Americans want to digitalize the African continent so that for every transaction you make, they get a coin.
An American is benefiting.
They get a coin from you. They have changed your mindset. They have changed your dress code. You take Red Bull. You don't take your own product. They have changed what you eat. They are now marketing KFC in Uganda. They are bringing McDonald's. They are changing your religion. You believe God is white. How can God be white when the first man was black? Those in Europe just lost their color. If you think I'm lying, why are the monkeys also the color of the white man? It's about the weather. Even the mangoes we eat in Europe, when they're ripe, they are not yellow, they are pink. They have changed your dancing. They have changed your behavior. So you are a perfect product. And my prediction as I go to sin, unlike slave trade, where you would carry one ivory tusk, they call it one elephant tusk or truck, this white thing. You carry one elephant task from Muscat to Zanzibar, and they release you and they give you an option of becoming a domestic servant. That journey during Mansa Musa's time would even take up to 6 months to carry one ivory task. But now the capitalism is in your bedroom. When you are sending emojis and data, they are smiling all the way in Europe. So to me, the wake-up call should be more of in economic sphere and not political fear, because fear. People don't eat democracy. People don't eat human rights. People eat food. People eat food. So those are my humble submissions. As I sit, I would want to tell my good friend Ruto that I interfaced with, because I joined Parliament in 2000 and we're all backbench MPs, that when a snake is in the house, when a snake is in the house, you have to make a decision whether to burn the house or to run out of the house. So by getting closer to the US, by getting closer to Biden, the enemy is getting near you. And some of us think they got so near Magufuli. And COVID, which did not kill people, killed him. This explains why even some of our presidents, even when World Health Organization said there is no COVID, they are still putting on masks. Thank you so much.
I just want to say about the NATO. You cannot be given any title of non-alliance without submitting a membership. It has never happened. All the 32 members, they are fully members of the NATO, and they have what is called individual partnership in NATO. And they have something called partnership for peace. This is where you will find those of Ukraine. They are partners of peace. And there is individual partnership that you have to submit your membership. It will not just be selected to be said, okay, now Kenya is a non-aligned member. Not only non-aligned, it's major. Major. You have to think about what is called major. There's something that is big, has been given to them, the assignment to do. So that is one of the things that we know. As one of my colleagues and brothers said, comrade, that NATO is not that 32 countries who are operating now. The NATO who came to Libya is not the fully NATO who came. It was selected members of NATO who came to Libya and destroy Libya without going back to their Congress, without taking a permission from Congress, and at the end they destroyed.
In other words, there was no general consensus.
No.
It was just
it was the interests. Even if you hear what Hillary Clinton said, we are protecting the interests of America. They didn't say interests of NATO. Because if America is dancing, everybody will dance. If America is crying, that means everybody should cry.
Yeah.
So that is how they came in
Libya.
that one. So let me talk about America. Is a country being run not by the government, is a country being run by the elite business personnel.
Individuals.
Individual people. Like Reserve Bank of America, who does you dollars, is not belong to the government.
The dollar.
It's not belong to the American. Who told you it's belong to America? This is the BlackRock people. These families who are controlling the world.
Hey.
The Rothschild family who established what is so-called Israel now. It was not established by the Israel people. It was established by the Rothschild family. They are the one who gave money. They are the one who gave influence even in the United Nations.
Ambassador Tony, are you serious?
That is true. Even before Jacob Rothschild died, he said, we are the one who established Israel. It's not something secret here. This is not secret here. So somebody said, where did you get this info? It is not secret. We are now in an open world where you can see and read and listen. So we have to be understandable of what is happening and the geopolitics that is changing. These are the people who can play with the world economy. These are the people who can say, sleep, you will sleep. Like what they did, they shut down the whole world because of the COVID, which is not relevant.
COVID was not real. They just wanted the world to sleep.
It was not real. That is why now, that's the interview. Who have seen the interview for Bill Gates?
What did he say?
And who have seen the senators who want to arrest Anthony Fauci because of those nonsense of the COVID-19? The vaccines. Now Bill Gates is busy producing every week 38,000 mosquitoes. 38 million mosquitoes they produce every week.
38 million mosquitoes every week.
Eggs. And this is how they spread.
To do what? As a source of food, he wants to give us
food, my friend.
Hey.
That's why you have typhoid. That's how you have malaria in South America and all these places.
Bill Gates is in a laboratory.
In a business of that mosquitoes.
Producing 38 million mosquitoes
yeah.
every week.
And it's only females. They separate female from male mosquitoes. So we are in a dilemma. We have to understand here. The non-alliance membership for Kenya is good for them to be. But as the East Africa community, we have a parliament, isn't it? This thing should be debated by our parliament.
Yes.
Because you are coming to us like, why did Russia invade Ukraine? It's because of the neighboring, bringing NATO near to us.
Free your mind now. Free your mind now.
That is the reason why Russia invaded. Because if NATO is going to be my neighbor, is a problem. I have to go in. And he started destroying everything. And they promised Zelensky that Ukraine is going to be a member of NATO until today.
They are not.
Launching billions of dollars. This is with the Democrat Party of America, who gave the non-alliance.
I also hear since the war began in Ukraine, Ukraine used to be the world's largest supplier of grain. Now it is America supplying. America has taken over all the market.
Because there is war, you cannot do farming. Since 2022, it's 2 years war now.
So America has even taken over the market of Ukraine globally. They're the ones supplying the grain.
It's about economic playing games. Everything we see around, politics, sanction is about economic play. These are the games. Because you cannot have the excuse that Russia is coming to Africa or China is coming. They are already here. This is not the first time that Russia is here. or China is in Africa. Even whatever they promise, they will put road with billions of dollars. They will not do that. It is just all promising. Because this money has to be debated by Congress. It will not just come out unless it's coming from a pocket of one man business. But if it is taxpayers, it has to go through the Congress. And the majority of Congress are Republican. Even Ruto was tabled to speak, to join session to speak. But they boycott him. They refused to give him to speak in Congress. Did you see the video in Congress? No? It's just taking him to Lincoln, driving him with that train of Lincoln, and then taking him to Martin Luther King, to Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is coming to invest $175 million in Kenya. Only Coca-Cola. And they brought all these guys, the actors, like this chap of the basketball. Doing what with? He's a huge man. Oh, it's Stephen Harvey. Stephen said he's coming in November.
Steve Harvey.
He's coming. Yeah, he's coming. Steve Harvey is coming to Kenya, as according to his statement. I am coming to hang around with my brother. This is president of the country. How are you going to hang around with him? Are you going to the club?
Steve Harvey.
So you reduce
Comedian.
yourself down to go hanging around with Steve in Kenya. He was surprised to Ruto to see Steve. Is it you the same way? Yes, that's him. But let me bring it to you from back. America want to use a black American to be a bridge between Africa and US because they have lost everything. Wherever they go, they find resistance. Wherever they go, there is no way to put their head. And that is why they choose Kenya. And the reason why they choose Kenya because the current ambassador, Ambassador Margaret White Man, did a great presentation about the business and about GDP of Kenya and about Mombasa as a gateway of East Africa. That is one of the things that she did. And she was talking to the business community in America. So now Kenya is like a new destination in East Africa for American business. If they control Mombasa, that is mean some of the goods will not, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for the goods to move. Because now Mombasa is a gateway for us, the landlocked countries. And we have to have another alternative. Either we use Dar es Salaam or we use Congo. And then you have to have to rush the real way. The same thing with South Sudan has been sanctioned yesterday again by the Security Council, the arm embargo, and now they have sanctioned them even to freeze their assets. This is Security Council. And we have been talking and pushing the agenda of giving us a permanent seat in the Security Council as African, not as Africa Union, as Africa. But the problem we have with all these institutions, whether it's SADC, you come to ECOWAS, you come to all those organizations, IGAD. I was with professors yesterday. There was the ministers for education. They had a IGAD summit 2 days ago. I went to Entebbe to see them. Some of ministers and professors from university. And it's been funded by who? By European Union and Germany. So you cannot fund your own program of education. The Security Council of the African Union is being funded by the Western world. Everything. Until we come to our own senses as African people and start funding our own institution, this is where we will be strong.
Thank you so much,
This is where we will be
Ambassador.
strong.
Free your mind.
We have heard a lot of different arguments, and all of them are really interesting, really correct, really accurate. As Pan-African, we always go back to history to try to understand. Reading history is what helps us to understand the present, right? As our comrade have said earlier. And when we look at the history here, we look at the history of a really interesting place. I want to decenter the debate a little bit between Kenya and the US to remember that all of this is made in order to discipline Haitians. And why do we have to discipline Haitians? Because Haitians were slaves and asked to be free. In 1804, they were asked to be free in 1804, and they established the very first black republic on earth. They were free, they freed their mind, and they freed themselves. So the Western world wanted to punish them. And what we see today is that continuation of that history of 200 years, 250 years of punishing the cries of the slaves for its own independence. Haiti got independence in 1804 at the exact time where Africa was being colonized. Haiti was a country of black free people at the exact time that Europeans used to come in this continent to say that there were no civilizations. Haiti used to be that place that stand proud at the time where the continent was being destroyed and colonized. So it is important we understand that for America, it is important, and for global powers, before it was France, right? The Haitians pay a debt to French for their independence until really late, until really recently. So what do we have? What is the situation? The situation is quite simple to me. The situation is quite simple. The US are using Kenya to outsource the imperialist missions, okay? I will repeat that. The US are using Kenya to outsource the imperialist missions. So we are going to look at the interest of the US here to have Kenya Ruto coming. I wish he was to just take pictures with his wife, as my colleague said. I wish it was just holidays for him, but I don't think so. I think he's trading something really interesting here. He's trading against the Haitians and against the Kenyans. Why is he doing this? We're going to try to understand. When did Ruto come in power? September 2022, right? Elected with the company that we spoke about earlier, definitely an interesting elections. He comes to elections, he comes to power 9 months after Kenyans are in the streets, being killed by their own policemen because there's new taxes that are being raised up against the poor. In the meantime, since his elections, university fees have tripled. The price of fees in Kenya is absolutely unaffordable as we speak for the majority of Kenyans. At the very same time, since he's in power, there is a rising debt. He has asked a lot of financial actors to come with debt, those 6 banks that we were speaking about. So the guy has raised the debt. There is an unaffordable price for food. Food is absolutely expensive as we speak in Kenya. That's also why they try to import from here. The price of fuel has also raised up. So the price of fuel raised up, the price of education raised up, the price of almost everything that the common man use raised up. And what does Ruto decide to do? He's going to travel to the US. He's going to travel to the US to come and take some pictures. The last president that did that was in 2008, President Kufuor of Ghana. They established American base in Ghana straight after. And why is Ruto invited in the US with all the nice fancy things? It is because he's going to do the job of the US. And he's going to do it for cheap. He's going to do it for cheap. He's not even negotiating much for his country. He's going to do it for cheap, so he's being in the good books of Americans. And he thinks that being in the good books of Americans will help him to stay in power or maybe to raise a different country. President Ruto has signed most of the IMF policies that lead the situation of this country right now. He has signed a lot of documents that say stop spending on education, stop spending, tax the poor, tax more and more the poor. That's why they were in the street. People were in the street fighting. And when they are in the street, who did they fight? Did they fight Ruto? Did they fight his family? No, they fight Kenyan policemen. The very same Kenyan policemen that are going where? In Haiti. Thanks to the invitation of the American president. So an invitation of the American president doesn't come at a cost. It comes at a cost for Kenyans because now their own policemen that already beat them up in the street. In July 2022, July 2023, when you introduced the tax, there is at least 3 or 4 riots that side, and a lot of those riots are against the police itself, because the police is extremely violent. Why is the police extremely violent against the poor? That's what we need to know. Why is the police extremely violent against the Kenyans? That's what we need to know. The very same police is going to learn how to discipline Haitians that are in the turmoil of imperialism. It's been 200 years those guys suffer from imperialist intervention from the US, from France, in 2008 from Brazil. They suffer many interventions. The country is on its knees. Probably one of the worst situations in the world right now for that country. Why is it like this? Years and years of imperialism. As we said earlier, the Haitians used to have to pay a debt to France. The poorest country in the world was paying a debt to France. It's ridiculous. It has been ridiculous. So US imperialism in Haiti, we should all try to look at it because it's a really interesting question. And it comes out of the fact that Haitians wanted to be free. In that situation, what is there for Kenya? What is there for Kenya? Mr. Ruto has no interest into Kenyan nations. If you ask me, he has an interest into his own class, the national bourgeoisie. And yes, the policies that he's putting in place are great for Kenyan's national bourgeoisie. This is true. This is true. The banks, the new banking systems, the new electoral systems, all of this will help him to understand the finance of Kenyans, to understand how he can give them loans and to make more money. The Kenyan economy looks great, looks like it's making some progress, but the people in the streets suffer. But if you look at the paper of the IMF, they make progress. They make a lot of progress. They make progress for who? They make progress for their national bourgeoisie. They enrich the rich Kenyans. The rich Kenyans that we spoke about earlier that were really close to the white settlers in both the mindset and the material reality of their life. So what Ruto is doing really here is trading, making a small deal. We go to help you in Haiti, knowing that he's never going to sort out the situations, but he knows that his own policemen will be strong enough to beat up and discipline its own people tomorrow, when they will claim equality, when they will claim universal basic incomes, when they will claim their money, right? When they will claim that they want some part of that success story. Then the policemen in front of them will have learned from IT with American tools and American support and American intelligence how to deal with that situations. The target here is not about Ruto and Biden, it's the poor in Kenya. The poor in Kenya, they want to financialize them, as we said earlier. They want to give them loans with mobile money. They want to make sure they pay back, and they want to make sure they take 80% of the money. The national bourgeoisie is sucking blood here. They're sucking the blood of their own people. And to do that, they even go to the US. They even go to that state visit, and they said, okay, if you look a single second at the situation in Haiti, and I hope like you're gonna do it because a lot of the freedom of Africa is also have to do with from Haiti. If you look at the situation in Haiti, you know Kenya is not going to sort it out. Kenya is not going to sort it out. It is not true. It is not true. What they're going to do is pretend they do it for their policemen to learn how they can discipline people more, how they can control people, how they can control masses that demand more rights, masses that demand better elections, masses that demand more money and a better share of the repartition of the money of the country. Those masses are the real targets of that deal between Ruto and Biden. No one else, nothing else. Kenya is outsourcing, the US are outsourcing the imperialist war to Kenyan national bourgeoisie, so the national bourgeoisie can get richer tomorrow. Thank you.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Yes. So I was last there in March. And if people remember, yes.
Sure.
And I spoke at Pan-African Pyramid. I'm going to go back to what I said then because we're seeing it, and I said it, but if we don't know the players, then it's not as obvious as it looks. So I'm going to change the paradigm a bit, and then I'll answer your question. When I was there in March, I said, the Jews, I want to be very specific. The Jews are on their way to Africa. We have to say no. Now I'm going to put it into a perspective and explain as it relates to Kenya and Uganda and Congo and Haiti why I'm saying the Jews. it is important for Africa to understand who the invader is that is coming and what their intention is, because you have to prepare differently for each. When the Arabs were coming to North Africa, if we thought they were coming for exploitation, we'd have been making a grave error. They were coming for enslavement and to move in permanently, which is genocide, meaning you're not preparing to fight and resist oppression. You're going to be taken or you're going to be killed so that they can move in and take the land, as we see Egypt, Mauritania, the different regions of North Africa that were purely African at one time. They're no longer purely African. When the Europeans were coming for colonialism, if you thought they were coming for slavery, to kidnap you and take you somewhere, you would have prepared the wrong way. They were coming to exploit the land. The transatlantic slave trade, which is how we got here to the West, they want to actually take the people. If you knew that was what they were coming for, then you have to organize to prevent them from capturing you. They're not there for what's in the land at that moment. You have to know what they're coming for and who's coming. What we are witnessing, and I'll explain it right now and experiencing, is an international Jewish extirpation, meaning what we're seeing in Palestine is no different than what they're trying to bring. Remember, before they went to Palestine and chose Palestine, one of the places they were going to choose for their quote unquote homeland was Uganda, East Africa. They haven't changed the program or plan. They just started with the extermination of the Arabs in Palestine. They're on their way to East Africa now. Let me put it in a context and then talk specific to Kenya and Uganda. If we look at the United States of America, it is not what it traditionally was. It used to be a white, primarily white controlled nation where the economy was controlled by Jews, but it was a white controlled nation politically and socially. It was still oppressive, but it was not entirely controlled by Jews. What you see as the United States of America today, there are two different entities. On the ground with the everyday people, there's still somewhat of a constitution. That is the United States of America. The ruling class through the executive branch is Western Israel. It is not the United States. Every decision that is being made by Jews for Jews, for the destruction of America, where they're targeting white people, for the destruction of Africa, where they're targeting African people, for the destruction of Asia, where they're targeting Asian people, where they're creating war with NATO and Russia to exterminate the last white empires who can fight them militarily. That's what we're actually witnessing. The assault on Kenya is not American, it's Western Israeli, even though it's coming through America because they control the infrastructure through the executive branch. Department of State, Anthony Blinken, Jew. Now, let's look at the different pieces of what we're being faced with, because we're talking about a 21st century Mobutu with a plus behind it. It's an entirely different level. It started with our African brothers and sisters selling our people into the Arab slave trade and then the transatlantic slave trade. In both cases, the business infrastructure of these atrocities was run by Jews. It was their industries. In the Atlantic slave trade, they worked with Black people in business. It was business. It was commerce at that time. We'll sell you these people, give me some rum. Give me a few guns, I'll sell you a bunch of people. That became our plight here in the Western Hemisphere. This is going further. The same Africans who were kidnapped and enslaved and sold to Jews and to whites to the West, the single group of people in the history of the world to successfully be kidnapped, defeat their enslavers. The Haitian people fought the British and defeated them when they were one of the most powerful militaries in the world. They defeated the Spanish when they were one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And then they defeated the most powerful military in the world, the French, to declare themselves independent and free. This is the single free African republic in the Western Hemisphere, autonomous. Instead of going to fight them, which they have sent the US in many times, and our Haitian brothers and sisters are still struggling, but they're still free. Instead of the whites going, because they haven't conquered them, they are now coming with commerce to pay another Mobutu, another Tipu Tip, race trading African on the continent, a Mobutu, to come to the Western Hemisphere.
Ruto.
Yes, Ruto. We're going to pay you, Ruto, to send Africans who have no quarrel with their Haitian brothers and sisters in the West. You go and murder the Haitians. And why are they doing it? Again, Anthony Blinken, Jewish. What does Haiti have? Haiti has iridium, the second largest deposit of iridium behind South Africa. I think the gentleman came up there and spoke about that before. He's absolutely correct. Who is after the iridium and sponsoring the gangs that are creating the violence in Haiti? Gilbert Biggio, Jewish billionaire that goes back and forth between Haiti and Canada. So it's a Jewish-sponsored hit piece getting mercenaries from Mobutu, Ruto in Kenya, African people, to go after the Africans that were sold and who defeated the enslavers. And you now go there and instead of selling them, go murder them for us for a few pennies. The last thing I'll tell you is going to hurt, but I want you to hear this because it's critical. It is a Jewish international extirpation process.
To Sabe.
Mr. Chair, what we are handling today in regard to the relationship between Kenya and the US is equally very, very important. Mr. Chair, first of all, we need to probably maybe to understand what we mean by the non-NATO alliance or being an ally. Mr. Chair, it is very, very important to know this because, as I've said earlier, it shapes the understanding of the matter, the subject matter at hand. US designated 18 countries as non-NATO ally, and this include Argentina, Australia, Bahrain, Brazil, Colombia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, Jordan, Kuwait, Morocco, New Zealand, Pakistan, Philippines, Qatar, South Korea, Thailand, Tunisia, and now the recent one, Kenya. Now, it has now that they are now 19. Mr. Chair, Kenya becomes the fourth country in Africa and the first country in the sub-Saharan Africa to hold the designation position, meaning that there will be a fulfillment of years of collaboration, of matters of joint counterterrorism operations across the Great Lakes region. Mr. Chair, you know very much what happened in Kenya when the Al-Shabaab attacked Kenya. Somewhere in 2013, I think the Westgate, you know what happened in Westgate. And that led to the permanent occupation of US armed forces in Lamu, where they put their military base to counter this. So by having this ally, Kenya will have a chance to see that issues of security, issues of health, issues of greening energy, and other developments will actually be on course. And we believe that Uganda or the Great Lakes region will benefit, because this is what we are aiming at. Now, what's wrong with if Kenya has become a leader in terms of military software to pursue other areas which have war? We could be having now, like in the DRC, this would be the things that would help us cap insecurity in this nation. Thank you. I don't see any problem. Thank you.
If this ally is in exactly what the word means, non-NATO, then it will be beneficial to Kenya itself and Africa at large. But if the word non-NATO is just a cottage, then that is a worse thing for Kenya and Africa at large. The statement made by every speaker on this ground clearly shows the very, very, very much negative impact of what NATO is heading to bring in Africa. You remember in 1949 when NATO was formed, and its objectives, which objectives is already failing. So Africans, open your eyes to that so that it may not affect us negatively. Because America, just like one of the speakers said, America is already going down. And not to go down, Africa is the best target. Thank you.
I believe that the ideas that have come out of this debate, if taken seriously, we can get some solutions. Especially, there is an idea that since there is EAC, Ruto cannot go and commit the entire EAC alone as an individual. Because once you bring any idea that supports NATO in Kenya, you have actually brought it into the East African Community region. And yet there is a leadership. So if we believe that we must act together, Ruto ought to have sought the ideas and the opinions of the rest of the member communities. And so there is the East African Parliament, there is the AU. I think these are matters that need to be taken at that level. The East African Community Parliament, the ESC Parliament, and the AU. So that there is also the Pan-African Parliament, Professor Alenyo George William. Yes. There is the Pan-African Parliament. This is a Pan-African issue. You bring an enemy in the region means everybody else is going to be affected. So there needs to be a consensus on that issue. My name is Andrew Irumba Katsaba, and I see you next Friday. Thank you so much.